Hey guys, so this is going to be my first video talking about history, and to my surprise you guys actually want me to talk about this, and you guys, like 20 of you voted yes, and you guys voted for King Henry II of England, which I'm absolutely stoked about. So he was my favorite English monarch, not because he was a good guy or anything, but he was a really good king, just not really morally good. So let me start. Um, so he was born in 1133 to Geoffrey, the Count of Anjou, which is some part in France, and Empress Matilda, who was actually the daughter and heir of King Henry I of England. So, um, Geoffrey and Matilda did not exactly have the best marriage. So Matilda always saw herself as a princess, um, the heir to the throne, and she was not very happy to be marrying down to just a mere count. She always wanted to be married to some future king, and she didn't get that. But still, Matilda was amazing. Um, she was awesome, and she ended up raising Henry to become the amazing king that he was, even if he did not exactly have the best morals. So when Henry actually ascended to the throne, it was not really through Matilda. So for his entire life, literally from 1133 when he was born to 1153 when he um I guess ascended to the throne. I mean, like during that 20-year span, it was just a huge civil war. It's called the Anarchy. It was between Empress Matilda and King Stephen, who was her cousin. So Matilda was supposed to be the rightful heir, but it's literally 1100s medieval England, and people just hated the idea of having a woman ruler. They thought it was super weak. So all of the nobles and the barons were like, "Hey, let's just put Stephen on the throne instead of her." Um, so yeah, rightfully so, Matilda decided to fight against Stephen. Um, so that was a really long civil war, a lot of bloodshed, and then in 1153, that was when the war ended, and that's because Henry and Stephen agreed on a compromise where Stephen would rule for the rest of his life, but Henry would become his rightful heir. Um, and then a year later, in 1154, Henry formally ascends to the throne. And then shortly after, he marries Eleanor of Aquitaine, and Aquitaine is just some part in, I believe, southwest France, but it's like this massive portion of land, and Henry inherited all of that through marriage. So they were kind of just the European power couple. And then overall, his reign was pretty good. He had a strong grip on his kingdom. Um, but the probably the biggest thing he was known for was for ordering the murder of the Archbishop on accident. And let me explain that. So, there's actually some history behind that, obviously. So the Archbishop was Thomas Becket, and he was best friends with Henry for most of their adult lives, but they kind of turned sour, and in the end, um, like in the end, Thomas did something that Henry did not like, and then Henry was venting but his knights actually heard it and they interpreted it as an order to murder Thomas. So they literally pulled up to the cathedral and just boop off with his head. Um, yeah, that was pretty gruesome. But that's medieval England and just every day. But the second thing Henry was known for was for his family's rebellion. So he was a great monarch, but he was crazy obsessed with power. And this is kind of what led to his downfall. So he had a bunch of sons, namely Henry the Young King, his heir, Richard, his second oldest, and John, his youngest. Um, so with Henry the Young King, his heir, you're usually supposed to lavish him with everything. You're supposed to spoil him, give him money, land, whatever he wants. Henry never did that because he was just so obsessed with his own power, and Henry the Young King was not having it. And he actually ended up rebelling against his own father, and also along with him, Richard did, and Eleanor did, Eleanor, his wife. Um, and yeah, it was just like one massive rebellion. Um, and then Henry actually ended up winning. And his wife Eleanor was captured, and she was actually in jail until she was like in her 80s. And if you even live until that long in the Middle Ages, that's like crazy impressive. Um, but yeah, Eleanor, she was in jail for so long, and yeah, she survived, and I think that's just amazing. But even though Henry did send his own wife to jail, he forgave his sons just because who else does he have to like take over the kingdom after him? Didn't really have much of a choice. And then unfortunately, a couple years later, Henry the Young King actually dies, and then all of his plans are foiled. And now there's another scramble to see who's the heir, because now you have Richard, who's now the oldest, and John, who's youngest. And Richard, as oldest, you expect to be named the heir, but Henry, he was really hesitant to do that because one, that would mean giving up power. Go figure. That seems to be a common theme. And two, because the last time he named his heir, that did not go very well, and that was actually the cause of um, the murder of the Archbishop. Um, but yeah, Richard was I don't want to say he was impatient, but he thought that he feared that John was going to be named. And because of that fear, he decided to rebel against Henry. And that's literally the second family rebellion in his reign. Wow. Um, but Richard and along with his friend who is King Philip of France. I think it was Philip II. Yeah, Philip II of France. They're friends, and together they fought against Henry, and they won. Um, so they seek terms with him, and at that point, Henry's literally like in his 50s. And at that point in your life, in the Middle Ages, you're old, like old. And the fact that Eleanor lived until like she was 90 is insane. But Henry is old, and he kind of just nods his head to whatever terms they want. And then sadly, a few days later, he's dead. So that's the end to a very interesting reign. Um, but yeah, so I guess I should also talk about the aftermath of Henry II's reign. So after Henry dies in 1189, um, Richard does ascend to the throne. Um, and Richard the First Lionheart, he was known for being an amazing crusader, but he only reigned for 10 years until 1199, and he died on crusade. And this is a funny story. He was he actually died on crusade, and he was shot in the heart with an arrow from a guy who was using a frying pan as a shield. Um, but yeah, just funny story. And then um, after Richard dies in 1199, John ascends to the throne, and John reigns until I believe 1216 or 12, I think it was 1216. But yeah, this King John was known as the infamous and the only King John in all of English history because he was just so terrible that they literally forced him to sign a document that limited his rights as a king. And that's and that document is Magna Carta. You probably heard of that before. But yeah, Henry II, amazing king, terrible morals, but still a crazy strong ruler. Richard, his heir, also a great king, great crusader, great warrior, and John, his youngest, terrible in every single way possible. But yeah, that's it. So thank you so much for making it through this 12-minute video. And if you're still here, I love you. Even if you didn't make it, I still love you. But if you want more of this, let me know. But if not, I understand. This took a lot longer than I expected. But yeah, thank you. Bye, guys.